Australia financial institution Westpac has invested about $63 million to help about 350 female entrepreneurs, making a significant step towards gender equality in the corporate sector. This action, of course, is a component of a larger $500 million pledge made about a year ago to support small companies run by women, with the goal of closing the financing gap that they say disproportionately impacts women in Australia's market. We've got a couple quotes from the managing director of Westpac, who, of course, is in charge of business lending. And he said that we know there's a gap in the Australian market for startup funding, particularly for women. Our research shows 51% of women plan to apply for finance to support growth, yet more women, 29%, as opposed to 21% of men, find it harder to access finance. That's Shane Howell, who is the Westpac MD of business lending. Here in Nigeria, Doyin Abiola-Tobun is the CEO of ARC. They're an online platform, I think trying to be the Airbnb of storage. Is that right? Good morning to you. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Ruth.
And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
What do you make of what Westpac is doing?
I mean, I love what Westpac is doing. I think what's particularly interesting is that money doesn't solve all problems, and they're cognizant of that. They have a training program for their bankers, which enables them to understand the challenges that women face. So, for example, if we use our local context, networking is one of the challenges for a lot of women-owned businesses. As we all know, globally, there's a boys' club, and there are some hurdles for a lot of women to make the right connections. Banks could actually actively help by creating forums that will basically help women to expand their professional network. The other thing as well is that we have to be cognizant of cultural context. A lot of times in terms of collateral for debt financing, women for various reasons do not have property that's in their name. So if we say to ourselves, yes, we have programs to increase funding to women, but we don't take into account these realities, we won't be doing much to move the needle. So I found that particularly useful in how they've been able to approach this. So
obviously it's a private sector initiative. Is the story here that government can't do this alone? Private sector has to play its role as well.
I mean, clearly government's role is to provide the private sector with an enabling environment. Government doesn't have the capabilities or the incentives in order to basically try to appraise the opportunities within the marketplace as well as the private sector can. I think banks, venture capitalists, private equity firms are more well placed to do that.
Yeah, okay, so how did you get ARC off the ground? Was it the bank of mom and dad or friends and family or a bank support? What's your story?
So basically I was fortunate to have been in the workforce for about 16 years before founding ARC. So personal savings came in. And
I forgot that category, thank you. Yes.
yes. Yeah. And we are also backed by some great venture capital companies as well.
Okay, so your aim, I like the Airbnb example model. Explain how that works, what you're trying to do here.
Okay, so basically what it is that we're trying to create flexibility in the area of inventory storage as well as inventory management technology for businesses, especially businesses that have proven their concept and are on the path to growth. So small and like medium-sized companies. Generally what would happen with these sorts of businesses is that they would be stuck with having to procure a fixed term of space, for example, 300 square meters for a fixed year. But if you trade in actual goods, there's a high season, a low season, a standard season, and it's very unlikely that you will need that amount of space. And generally, you're forced to pay large upfront costs, at least 1 to 2 years. And as a growing business where we all understand the financial constraints that businesses face, it just didn't make any sense. So we stepped in basically and realized that, look, there's a lot of excess capacity, excess warehousing capacity, large corporations that have warehouses that are not fully utilizing for a myriad of reasons. So we are now able to basically place the companies that need the warehousing as and when they need it, and then give them the enabling environment to expand and take advantage of this huge market in Nigeria by continuously growing the network of warehouses that we actually operate out of. Plus, we also give them the technological tools to manage their stock from wherever they are.
So if there's a dashboard and if you're selling pens and one pen gets moved out, it shows up on the dashboard. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, pretty much. Yes, so pretty much you can control who has access to your stock when they have access, and then you can also get a viewpoint as to how things are moving in and out, regardless of which one of our warehouses or if you are using multiple warehouses within ARC's network.
Is technology magic? Would you call it magic?
No, technology is not magic.
It's not magic.
No, it's not.
It's human, because I tend to call it magic, because it's so seamless and so effortless, and it just makes things so straightforward, you know? A dashboard is supposed to tell you where everything is. But if you think of how people operate things in Nigeria, going from the government level to certain private sectors, they make it harder because they just don't use the tech.
So I think one of the things about technology is that technology does require human beings to actually basically tell it what to do. Yes, in most cases. So, for example, when we were building our own dashboard, we had to kind of understand things from a consumer's perspective, and also from the warehousing perspective. So, from an operational side, what do we need to have? And then also from the customer side, what are the critical things that they need to see? But if you just build technology without being cognizant of the requirements or the needs of the users, then it doesn't quite work that well, which is why we see that you would have Microsoft Word coming up with new changes. You would have your phone and they'll tell you to do an update, because the reality is that your needs are changing and you need to keep track of that.
I don't use a watch anymore because of my phone, and sometimes if my wallet goes missing, I'm fine. I have my phone. If my phone goes missing, then heart palpitations, right? So the Airbnb model, how do you make money? You don't own the inventory of those warehouses. So how do you make your money?
So we do not own the inventory. We don't need to. We basically work with companies who own the inventory. But what we do is that we've basically wrapped up all of their inventory-related needs. So basically, we are offering businesses a turnkey service with flexibility. So what that essentially means is that we do get paid because of the service that we're offering. So for example, as a business owner, whatever it is that you sell, everything from the storage handlers, equipment, the inventory management technology, the security, the insurance coverage, everything is all wrapped up. And we can also connect you with third parties who will deal with the transportation of your items. And then on the other hand, the warehouses, the owners of the warehouses who have this excess capacity are very, very happy to come on board on our platform, because otherwise they would be stuck with excess capacity and they would not be making any money. So we serve two customer groups on the supply and demand sides.
You mentioned transportation. Before we came on air, we were having a chat about that disastrous traffic that happened in Lagos 2 nights ago, where some people got home at 3 a.m., some people slept in their offices because they couldn't get home. On the logistics side, with third parties you deal with, have you gotten any feedback as to whether fuel costs or fuel prices have seeped into their operational costs? Any feedback on that end?
Of course, there's lots of feedback on that. And what we basically try to do for businesses is try to help them to get rid of the redundancies that would have been. So in a time when things were cheaper, businesses would do certain things like, oh, we would like to store with ARC, but we want to do our testing, we want to move our goods somewhere else to go and test. But now we've basically been able to provide them with those services. Then also things like repackaging. We also make sure, so that way, basically the movement of goods is not as frequent as it used to be. And interestingly, customers are willing to pay us for that service because it's cheaper than having to deal with the transportation headaches and not being able to plan, because obviously we know what's happening with prices.
Right, so outsource to the experts. That's basically what it is. Since we're talking tech, and that's what you essentially are, a tech company, have you dabbled in artificial intelligence to streamline some of what you're doing? Are you looking at it?
So we're looking at it, but we think one of the dangers of businesses in our environment is that we try to cookie cutter everything that's being done in the Western world. The realities of things in the Western world that has led to the use of AI there, the way it's being used, it has to do with what the operating environment is. Our operating environment here is quite different.
You say different, you mean difficult? Okay.
I mean, in some regards, yes, but we always like to look at the opportunities in these challenges. So basically what we found is that it's usually the worst thing to just see what, for example, warehousing counterparts in the US are doing and try to copy it. What we try to do is basically think with regards to what it is. For example, from the operational perspective, the cost of handlers is significantly cheaper than it would be like in the US. So there are certain things that we don't necessarily need to use AI for, but the predictive side of it, in terms of the predictive patterns for customers and things, those are aspects we're looking at.
You think a robot's going to take over your job? What do you think about the hype with AI, that the robots are coming and they're going to take my job and everybody else's?
I mean, I think they will take the more manual jobs that don't necessarily need a lot of thought processing. The analytical side of it, I'm not sure the robots are there yet. And I would like to think I have some analytical strength.
Certainly. What's gender balance like at your company?
Basically, I mean, gender balance, we're quite balanced, but I will say that in the core engineering roles, we could do better. But it's basically the reality within the marketplace. You just don't see as many candidates coming through. And that's one of the things where we've now decided that what we will be doing is that we will be training. Because at the end of the day, like, we can't use that as an excuse. Right.
You see, and we just had that conversation with our prior guest. The why, when we say this is male-dominated and that is male-dominated, do we have to go to the basics and from, I don't know, maybe the school levels or parents, inspire more girls to get into these fields? What needs to happen?
We need to inspire more girls to get into the fields, but we also have to be realistic of the realities for women. So I heard you and Chinwe earlier, you were having this conversation. The truth of the matter is, there is the reality that some women choose to have a family. From the operation side of our work can be quite tough. We can have containers coming out of the port in the middle of the night. And the reality is that in this cultural context, if a woman says she's going to work, very late at night, that could
husband's gonna be
that could be a problem.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
yeah.
I think the onus is on employers like ourselves to try and make the allowances for that. We're not going to change the culture. And as a business, I don't necessarily think, especially the kind of business we do, we're not here to change culture. But we're here to basically work within it and actually make the best of it, because there are many things that women can contribute great value to us in terms of them being employees.
What does the pipeline look like for entrepreneurs, women for women-led business? From your vantage point in the case, how are you seeing things? Are they more like you coming out?
Entrepreneurship has always been very popular with Nigerian women.
Yeah.
I don't think the pipeline in terms of number has ever been the problem.
Yeah.
I think the issue we see is that a lot of women are concentrated in the nano and the small side of things. When you start talking about medium and large corporations, the women start to tail off. And I think that, yes, access to finance is actually one of the critical factors, because to do big business, you need big or large sums of capital.
Right.
That is just the reality. But in addition to that, I think that capital in and of itself doesn't solve everything. I fundamentally believe that even in business,
Gotcha.
you need certain networks. You need certain doors to be opened. You need to have certain mentors, sponsors. I mean, globally, anybody that we all look up to has had those things. And I think that those things are, for various reasons, harder for females. So the concentration for us in Nigeria is not about making entrepreneurship attractive to women, because in fact, a lot of women do leave the corporate world and become entrepreneurs for the reasons that we spoke about earlier. Yeah. But it's about how well we're doing at trying to empower them to scale those enterprises. I think that is the critical area to look at.
I wish we had more time. Fantastic conversation. Doyin Abiola-Tobun, CEO of ARC. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy International Women's Day again.
Thank you.